to start off by really talking about what inspired us, because this is not real popular. It's definitely not extremely popular where we're from either. So really what inspired us and kind of, I guess, was a whirlwind to us was there was a gentleman at our church, and he was 19 years old. He sat in front of us every Sunday, and I will never forget this Sunday morning. This has probably been, about 8 years ago, and he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And by profession, I'm an RN, so I just could not figure out what the link was. I just could not figure out what the link was between.
There's batteries right there. It's got a battery meter on it that looks like it's going dead. I'm not the sound guy.
Can y'all still hear me? Yeah. Okay, that's good, that's good. Maybe I just need to, we'll share. We still have to share. Okay, that'll work. So when he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, I just kept pondering, what is the link between all of the new diagnoses with cancer? I took care of people with mastectomies, we did prostatectomies, there's so much stuff, and I just kept, what is the missing link? So the more I got to reading, the more I got to studying and researching, I really felt like all of the data was pointing towards our food. So with that being said, that really prompted me to dig into what is going into our food, how are we growing our food, what are we putting on our food, and it's a big staircase. It is very complex, starting in the agriculture realm of what we're putting in our soil, to what we're putting on our plants after they grow, to then what we're putting on our food after it's harvested. So that really kind of sent us into this journey of what we're doing with our food and how it's affecting our health care. So that was kind of what initially started us with this. While we don't want to put chemicals in our soil, while we want to use our animals and other things that we grow, things like companion planting, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail. But that's kind of what started our journey in this, is seeing a teen that we were very close to their family was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it just really hit us like a ton of bricks. And I'm sure everybody in here can raise their hand and say that they've had a close friend or a family member that has battled cancer, or that they've lost to cancer. So for us, it was just of the utmost importance to try to rid those things out of our life so that we could conquer this health crisis, starting with our own family.
So you see in this picture, this is actually Misty's kitchen garden. So we have we look at everything in a permaculture design, meaning zone 1 through zone 5 or 6. Our zone 1 is gardens that we put a lot of time and effort in, such as our herb gardens, our medicinal gardens, the ones that need more attention, the ones that need more fertilization, the natural fertilization that we're using. It takes us working on daily. Now some of the things like our peas and our big gardens, that does not need as much attention as we get started, they're in the further zones. But just like this one here, since this picture, this was about 3 weeks ago, the garlic is now gone. We've replaced it with something else. These other flowers here, the calendula and this lettuce right here is now bolting. We're taking those seeds and we're using them and putting them up for next year. Our goal is to always cover our soil and always make sure that it is growing food for us, or growing medicine. Now, that soil, if I left it uncovered with something, if I'm not covering it in some way, it's going to lose its nutrients, it's going to lose its balance. So we'll talk a little bit about what we do. We have several styles across our farm of how we make sure that our gardens are always producing. If it's going right back in the ground with something, if it's companion planting, if it's covering you up with polyculture. So we'll talk about all that as we talk. So, questions. This is the first things that we think about when we talk about chemicals or gardening without chemicals. What kind of soil are we trying to grow? What weed and grass pressure do we have? What are we growing? I can't grow lettuce in Mississippi in June. It just won't work. Without some kind of chemicals, I have to work with the weather. And then also, what zone are we growing in? So there's things in Mississippi that we may not grow, but there's things in North United States you may not grow. So we learn what grows best. We work with our temperatures. We work with our zone, because that way we're not working against it. So, this is her greenhouse. And so our greenhouse is pretty much moving 24 hours a day. She is out there every day watering, making sure it looks good, and growing new plants from all the seeds. Talk about the tomatoes that you did with fall tomatoes and you kind of roll right back into spring too.
Well, first I wanted to add that he really made a point on, you're going to see that when you're growing without chemicals, it's not as easy as just putting chemicals in your soil. It is a little bit more difficult. So finding things that grow well in your area is really going to play into your benefit. I have had to learn that the hard way because I want to do everything. So I really had to say, to make my life easier, I have to really boot out the things that just don't do well here and put those things in my ground or in my greenhouse that do grow well. And what he's talking about with the tomatoes, so last June, I planted tomato seeds. We put them in the greenhouse. I overwintered them. We had tomatoes all winter from the greenhouse. I took 2 of the tomatoes from the greenhouse and just replanted those. So it's been a beautiful cycle of a full year now of using those same tomatoes and using those same seeds by utilizing the greenhouse and growing there.
And so it goes back to soil is one thing, but the seeds that you're growing is another. So if you find a good quality seed like those were heirloom tomatoes, Cherokee purples, but it's ones that's done very good for us. Why do I want to break that cycle? Let's keep it going. So we took 2 broken, actually, if y'all saw my daughter running around here, the youngest of the 6. She's the one that tossed the tomato and destroyed it on the ground. So we didn't waste it though. Guess what? We made seeds, and all of a sudden now we have, out of 2 tomatoes, we now have about 100 growing again. So that's encouraging to see. So the importance of seeds is just as important as the soil that you're growing in. Now, things to ponder with the soil. Now, I hear this all the time. Well, I've got red clay. Or I've got wet soil, I can't grow it. Or I'm growing in gravel. So what we have to do is, okay, if we're growing without chemicals, we've got to figure out what works best. So we're going to talk a little bit about zone 1 for us. Our zone 1 is a swamp. So we've had to really put time and effort there to make water move well so it doesn't make our soil too murky and nasty and take the good topsoil out. At the same time, we've got to get the water out. We've got to be building up the soil because all it is just muck. So we said, okay, here maybe back to Eden style gardens may be the best because we're adding to lasagna style method of gardening, meaning we're adding more soil, we're adding more compost only. Also, we're not putting any kind of covering over it. We knew that if we want this to grow and thrive and we want the soil to stay, we need to make sure that we're growing something year-round right here. So in those beds where we just showed you, we have something going in the ground every time something's coming up. It's succession every time. It does not get uncovered at all. So when the garlic came out, sweet potatoes went in. The whole purpose is because we don't want to lose the nutrients that are already there. We're going to put compost in there as we're planting whatever new is going back in. But we know if we leave that uncovered, it's going to go grass, or we're going to have to till it, which we don't want to till there, or it's going to cause issues with the soil. So we're going to lose those benefits. So in that part of the soil, where it's wet, in that part of the grounds where it's wet, we started doing more back to Eden or lasagna style method gardening. Now say you have clay. We have another area that it is junk dirt. It's a clay powder. It's red. It's terrible. It won't grow anything. So we said, okay, let's look at raised beds there. What that's doing is you're saying, okay, I know that I can't do anything with this clay without treatment or taking years and years and years of prep there. So let's skip all that and let's go to a raised bed method and let's start building on top of that. Let that be a subsoil up and have 2 foot of good soil on top of it. So then instead of trying to go into the ground, we're going to go on top of the ground. We've done that with other friends where they're like, hey, we can't go into the ground, we keep tilling it's like rock. Well, the more you till, the more it's going to turn into rock anyway. So you're not helping yourself there. If you're not using chemicals, then let's not fight it. Let's go above it. The more that the good soil sits on the bad soil, it's going to eventually start making better soil because you're building a better ecology. So you work with the ground that you have. Sandy soil, same way. That's great for root vegetables. It allows your vegetables not to get stuck in this muck. But at the same time, it doesn't hold water. So that means you've got to have water channeling there some way to get minerals from the water and also make sure it's getting fed like it's supposed to. Anything else there?
So economically, we've been asked before, how do we build raised beds and we have to bring in that much dirt because it can become kind of expensive. Has anybody ever heard of hugelkultur before? Yes, it's basically a process. We do this with all of our beds. You bring in sticks, you bring in limbs, you bring in leaves, you build it up, and then so that's, you're using that matter to build up, and you're not having to bring in as much dirt. You're using the free resources that you already have. Now those are going to eventually compost themselves and only be added to the dirt anyway as they're breaking down. But over, if you're looking at it economically, then you're just not having to bring as much dirt in because you're already using your free resources. And that has been a main question for us that we've had a lot is, well, I'm buying wood, wood is expensive. Now I'm having to buy dirt, dirt's expensive. Use what you have and build up. I have seen people grow in all kinds of stuff. It doesn't have to be just wood. It doesn't have to be just tin. I've seen all kinds of different things. I've seen people build mounds. I've seen all kinds of things. But if you bring the free stuff that you already have in your woods in, it will definitely help you. I don't think that we've ever built a raised bed from top to bottom without using with the agriculture style. So that's just a thought for y'all.
And so then we pass this little malware amendments. Well, when you're organic gardening or you're gardening without chemicals, if you buy those organic chemicals, you're paying top dollar. It's expensive to look for that unlisted fertilizer. So people say, well, we don't want to do that because it costs too much. So if you're not going to buy it, you've got to either grow or make it. So either are you doing compost? Are you building compost? Do you have animals? We're going to jump at animals to allow them to work their waste. Are you growing? And this is talking about comfrey. So we go comfrey to then add around other crops. Are you doing companion planting so that way they're getting fed other ways? So if you're not going to buy the expensive organic fertilizer, which we try not to, then you've got to find ways to make your own. So I would challenge you to start looking at, okay, let's grow. Like we grow for our bees, we grow for ourselves. What can we grow to supplement what's already growing? So I have blueberries for our bees. Well, we grow other blueberries that don't produce any blueberries, but they're the cross-pollination for the blueberries for the bees. Same way with companion planting. If we know that people feeds these, or we know this companion plant does great with tomatoes, we're going to grow those, not for really our benefit, but for the ground's benefit, and that's just less work for us. We have to deal with recovering the soil, we're giving nutrients back to the other crop, and then we're also able to harvest it if we can. There's nothing wrong with that.
Has anybody ever used fish emulsion before? Yeah, it smells terrible. But it is something that we have used before. Bone meal, have you ever used bone meal before? Okay, that's a great calcium right there. Eggshells, who uses eggshells? Yes, that's great. I'm going to burn a little bit. Okay, but some of the ones that we have bought before, because this is a timing thing. I was telling somebody just yesterday, all of the things that we do, we have not done overnight. Like it has been work and it has been time. You can't go to bed one night and wake up the next morning and expect a full organic garden and dairy cows and beef cows and pigs and meat birds and all of the things. It just doesn't happen that way. And we want to be realistic with y'all. So, bone meal, feather meal, anybody used feather meal before? That's another great one. So there are options out there that will help you along your journey as you're learning these other things, like using companion plants so that you don't have to use seven studs.
Think about, for instance, we were about harvest time. Does anybody journal their garden? Do you journal what happened, your successes, your failures? That is a big deal. You need to do that. You need to know what seed went where. You need to know what did great, what didn't do great. We've done this with tomatoes especially. We wanted to grow all these tomatoes and we realized either we have insects on one, or these didn't come up really well, or these were not as successful. So we started weeding out and journaling what did best, what did do best. So
Colby's better than I am.
We went to yes, she is not the journaler. I'm the journaler. So just for instance, like in our gardens, our big gardens, pea gardens, we know that Mississippi pink apple is great there. However, we can't grow English pea to save our life. I mean, it's one of those situations where we say, okay, well, then we're not going to fight that battle anymore. So when it comes to harvest time, you have to enjoy the successes, learn from the failures and make sure you make the changes. With organic gardening, you have to have patience. We have been gardening for 15 years, but when it comes down to organic gardening, it's taken us really 7 to 10 years at our property now to get the soils great. And we have one. We'll talk about this a little bit in just a second. I have a corn situation where when you're organic growing corn, you're terrible. Your corn looks bad. Everybody laughs at it when they point at it, corn laugh. But we've learned, we've got a whole other set that we've tried journaling and learning what it needed. It's doing great. It's taller than Misty right now. She's not too tall anyway. But it does look really good. So, soil. How can we test our soil and know what we even need? Now, you can do a soil test. There's nothing wrong with doing a soil test. Honestly, I would rather not do a soil test because I don't want to get tied up with that and understand that that's a crutch. It's a handicap always. I always have to depend on what my soil test tells me. So we do trial and error. If it works good there, we're going to journal it and put it back there. If it doesn't work there, we're going to try again later. We know that it's a lifetime goal. It's not, well, this season we failed, we quit gardening, we're not doing it ever again. Our goal is to keep on growing and understanding what does best where. As we were talking with the wet soil, I can't grow a potato in a wet soil. It will not grow. No root vegetables do it. However, Misty's got some things that are water. They love water. Elderberry loves water. So it goes right there. So we learn to grow where we need to grow based on what the environment gives us. Difference in gardens. You see behind this is that corn I was telling you about right there. All right, let that corn, there's elderberry behind it. Now that's a little small part of corn. This is what we call a trial corn. So we've been growing corn for years, and I'm telling you, it's hideous. It's like embarrassment. I don't want anybody looking at our corn because we don't feed it other than organics. So this spot right here, for 10 years, has had chickens. I mean, that's where a chicken run what? Well, we built a new chicken barn, and so it's all great, and we had all this sitting here. He said, let's just plant some, let's just throw some corn out there. It's been aging for about 6 months, and let's see how it does, because all the nitrogen, the elderberries are growing great in there. So we put corn there as thick as we can get it. We have not fed it anything. It's not had any chemicals whatsoever. It's not even had any natural fertilizer. It's all chickens. But it was enough chicken manure right there to make a difference. And now we have lush. I mean, these corn stalks are huge. And that's heirloom, non-GMO corn that has no chemicals on it. That's impossible for us to do. That is an accomplishment for us. Now, right in front of it is sweet potatoes. Man, we grow those things like crazy in South Mississippi, so that's a great thing. We've learned that we love growing Irish Reds, but we would rather grow sweet potatoes because we know we'll have better success there, which will allow us to stock our pantries up more and to be able to grow year over year. How old are those sweet potatoes? So we got those, yeah, tell that story.
So the sweet potatoes that he's talking about, they come from generations of Mississippi-ness. So Colby says I like to make words, and I do. So there was a guy that had come up to our farm. We also raised sheep, and he was interested in our sheep. He was asking us questions. He was looking at how we rotate our sheep and temporary fencing. So we were doing some teaching there with him. Well, his happy for us was some sweet potato vines. He had gotten his sweet potato vines from a gentleman who was 90 years old and had grew them his entire life. So we were gifted these, and I've been growing them for several years. And the beauty of it is when you learn the cycle of how to keep things, you never have to buy it. So I will be supplied with abundance of sweet potatoes literally for the rest of our lives. And I will never have to buy another sweet potato or a sweet potato slip because I've learned this system. And Colby was talking about seeds earlier. And really, who does some seed keeping? A couple of people. So the heirlooms, this is the beauty of something too, is the heirloom seeds, they can adapt to your environment over time, over generations, and also they can also become resistant to diseases and bugs. I know that sounds kind of crazy because we've been commercialized with hybrid seeds for so long. Now we're so dependent on, like I said, you have to treat the soil, you have to treat the plant, but heirloom seeds are actually very special. And those seeds, if you learn how to properly keep those seeds and then you keep them for season after season after season, they can actually work for you. So it's very eye-opening to see that, just like you mentioned the seeds earlier. When you learn those type things, it can completely change your garden.
So this statement here, it's either money or labor, and that's true. It's labor intensive to be organic. It just is. We have several gardens where we're no-till backing. We have several gardens that's raised bed agriculture, and then we do have some tillage gardens, which are cover crop gardens. Those are easy because I just till it. I make it easy. But we know that can't be the end-all be-all for that area. Our goal for the cover crop is to try to get it sold like it's supposed to. Once it's there, we're going to do just like the rest of them, and they'll be back to Eden-style gardens where we don't need to till it there. The problem with organics is you're in the gardens just about daily. It is harder work. We're not going to have the success that some people have. Our corn is not going to be as beautiful. Our tomatoes are going to be kind of lumpy. We understand that, but again, that's the beauty of it, is to have the things grown off our farm that may not be as perfect, but we know that it's the most natural form of that vegetable that we're growing. So you're going to have more time put into your garden as someone that doesn't use chemicals, either repelling insects or having natural fertilizer put on the crops or weed. So we do that a lot, especially in Mississippi. We grow Bermuda and Bahia grass more in our gardens than in the field. So, we have to fight that all the time. So animal goodness. This is our prime source of fertilization. What would you say is your favorite animal that deals with fertilization?
The rabbits.
Definitely. Rabbits. So we have had chickens, we've had cows, we've had all that. And it's kind of hard to go with a wheelbarrow and scoop up manure over there in the cattle field. So we started getting rabbits, and rabbits has changed the dynamic when it's come to fertilization. Rabbits use the restroom a lot. So it allows you to say, I have fertilization. They don't eat a lot, but they sure can use the restroom a lot. So now we have their urine and their manure, and it allows us to be able to utilize that. Now, how do we do that?
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the nasty smell of this bucket.
It's not, it's okay cleaning it out. It will splatter on you, I'm not gonna lie to you about that. But the beauty of them not eating a lot is we have 10 babies and
Oh, gosh.
probably 8 or so does, and then a couple of
Nails.
bucks, and then a couple of does. Yeah, I got those backwards. Yeah, so we're probably up to about 20 right now, and they do reproduce really fast, so just keep that in mind. But the beauty of them really is, if you're looking for something economically, because the bone meal and the fish emulsion is gonna come out of your bank account. The beauty of it is, once you have your rabbits and you put them in their cage, I forage for my rabbits a lot. And it's just as simple as walking in the woods and picking them some blackberry leaves or common seal peel that's all over the ground. I'll pick them some grass, and I have fed them for the day for free. Sometimes we'll give them a little alfalfa, but not very often because it is so expensive in our area. But I can go forage for them, put it in their pens, and then they use the bathroom and have literally created free fertilizer for us. And it's really a beautiful cycle, and we do clean it out. We pull the trays out, and we have, again, because we try to be very frugal, our cowlick buckets, the protein buckets, they're these big 30 and 50 gallon buckets that we have for the cows. I repurpose those. I planted them. I have citrus trees in them. I also use those when I'm cleaning out my rabbit pens, and I dump them straight in those buckets, pop them in a 4-wheeler, and go all over the farm and use it. It's actually cold manure too, so it's not hot like the chicken. If you go drop some hot chicken fertilizer right on your plants, they're going to be dead when you look at them in the next couple of days. But the rabbits are completely different. When I get ready to go clean out my pens, I can take them straight to my plants and put anywhere on my plants that I want. I've basically fed my plants for free. It just requires labor.
So who raises rabbits? Okay, who raises chickens? All right, who raises worms? Okay, who raises bees? We've got a few bee aviaries here. All right, who raises fish, aquaponics? Okay, a few more hands there. Okay, so what have we just talked about? We have literally talked about the ecology of the soil. We've talked about feeding them with fish emulsion. We've talked about feeding them with cold manure, hot manure, everything with those animals right there. Who butchers their own animals? Okay, chickens. They're going to give you feathers. That's feather meal. You can put feathers in the garden. it's funny when we do butchers, we do workshops. And here we are dumping like, blood out in the garden, dumping feathers out in the garden. Everybody's like, what are you doing? But that is our form of nitrogen. That is a form that you can put, you're taking every bit of that chicken and putting it back in the gardens for next season. Now, I'm not going to put that on my strawberries I'm just to eat, but I am going to utilize it in areas to make the garden do better. So we don't have any waste. We see, okay, can we use this processed blood? Can we use this, these feathers? Can we do more with those? Can we make bone meal from chicken carcasses? Yes. So you learn to use what you've got, and then all of a sudden you realize organic fertilization is not expensive. It's working. You have to be innovative. So we use all these animals to do that for us. Now let's talk on the big animals just for a second. I know it's on the garden. But the same way with our cows. We talk about resistant seeds. We talk about resistant crops and having a better quality soil. That works the same way with our pastures, with our cows, our sheep, and all the big animals. I've got beef cows, dairy cows, sheep, two different kinds of pigs, which is a lard pig and then the regular meat pig. Those generations, they have not been treated with anything. They've not had any chemicals on any fertilized grass. We have what we call junk grass because there's no chemicals, nothing going on the grass that we're cutting for hay. Then, so we know we can use their manure with no chemicals in it. So we have that. But then we're not giving them any kind of dewormer. All that because they built a resistance to the things that hopefully can make them stronger by having organics always fed to them. So the quality of what you're feeding your animals also matters because that's going to make them sicker. They're going to get more antibiotics, so that means your manure may be a little tainted. So think through that. I mean, if you're giving your animal bad food, then their manure is going to not be as good as it used to be. I always say clean manure. That's kind of a funny statement, but it's true. You want a cleaner quality manure going back on your plants because this is the stuff you're putting back in your body.
So Colby made a good point a while ago as far as taking your fertilizer. I'm specifically talking about the rabbits because that's what I use the most. But if you have strawberries, he mentioned strawberries. I have 2 huge strawberry patches actually brought a helping of strawberries with us for the kids to snack on. But when they're in bloom, you have to be very mindful of, because you don't want to make yourself sick. You have to be very mindful of the fruits and where they're producing and when they produce. The fall and winter are the times that I like to take our rabbit manure and spread all in our strawberry beds, because when they start producing in February, March, and April, I don't want that rabbit manure on the ground where my berries are producing. Does that make sense? Now there are some things like our tomatoes, there are some things that grow up. I fertilize them always because I don't have to worry about my fruits that I'm taking to eat. I don't have to worry about those being on the ground where the rabbit manure is going to be, so they're not ever touching the food. Does that make sense? Yeah, so be mindful as well when you're going out and you're putting your manures on your food. You don't want to apply those right where your fruits are forming. If they're on the ground, think about seasons, think about ways to get them off the ground, like your cucumbers are going to vine up and over. Times we have done that, times we have just let them run all over the ground. So just be a little mindful of that. You definitely don't want to bring something in and eat your lettuce that has been tainted. So just be mindful of that, because I would be amazed at times I've had people say, well, I went out and put it on my strawberries and now they're dirty. Don't do that, don't do that. Wait for the season to do that.
And also, does anybody make manure teas? I know that sounds gross, but basically, like she was talking about, sometimes you don't want to put your manure right around your plants. Well, you can literally age your manure in those totes, and then you have a pour liquid. It's almost like fish emulsion. It allows you to then take it, scoop out, and pour, and be a little bit more precise on where you're putting that fertilization around the root system or around where you're trying to feed. So think about that. It's nasty, it's gross. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. You don't get out there in like church clothes doing it. But you need to make sure that you have a bucket where you can age that manure with water on top of it, and now you're making this sticky goodness that's going to be an amazing fertilizer for your crops. About household amendments all the time. We talk about animal amendments, but now let's talk about household amendments. Things that you can use that you literally throw away that can actually feed your garden. So we have banana peels. Misty actually did this, just banana peels and eggs. What did you do? So what did you do?
The day before we left, I used all of our eggshells, and I had dehydrated some bananas and ground those into powder, and I took that powder form because it's already broken down, so I just kind of helped it along instead of taking the banana and putting it right in the compost and allowing it to break down there. I just put it in my dehydrator, ground it into powder, and put it right on. I have some, Colby speaks about we don't do sevens dust and stuff like that on our plants. That is a big, big no-no for us. So we are going to walk out sometimes and find little critters in our food. So I do go around, I try to at least once a day, if I can't do it once a day, just walk through and check on my plants, everything that we're growing, especially the foods. I found evidence of vine borers. Anybody ever get those darn vine borers? They were in my squash. They had gotten in and laid some, so what they do is they're moths, and they lay eggs under the leaves, and those little, they're like little worms will hatch out, and they will literally,
Gross.
they will literally bore themselves in the vines and start eating them out. So last year, we said a lot of trial and error. Last year, I tried something that I had read. I cut that stem open, got that sucker out, and covered it back up with soil. Well, this year, I tried something a little bit different, and I think it's going to be even better. I talked to my farm sitter today, and she said everything looks great. But I had used my eggshells and the banana that I dehydrated and ground into powder, and I put that in my stem after I got those little worm. It's just one, and he gets real fat because he's eating all your vines out. And then I covered it back up with soil and watered it, and she said it was beautiful. So I used that I was doing that Tuesday when I was outside on the farm tour, literally right before we left. I used those banana peels, calcium and potassium right to the plant, just like that.
So we helped it, along without having the soil help it, we helped it get some of the things from our house that we typically throw away. So think of banana peels or potassium, also phosphorus, coffee grounds, nitrogen, so fill up your coffee grounds. They're not going to compost, or they're not going to an animal of some sort. Make sure you're not just throwing them away. Yeah, don't use any kind of sprayed coffee for sure. You can use hollow point coffee. All right, so fish tanks, again, if you're dumping fish emulsion, if you're adding more water, take some fish water out of the aquaponics system, you can use on your plants. Leaves are another great thing. We actually deep bedded our strawberries and leaves this year. We take our blower, we cut grass or whatever we're doing, cut up leaves for the fall. We take all that excess and blow it onto the strawberries, and all we did was insulate it. We made it a worm habitat. So that was perfect. We used the leaves, they were already there. We're in Mississippi, we have a lot of trees. So we were able to use what it was already dropping, put it right back on the gardens, and now we have a compost sitting right there, but also insulation for the sun, for the winter. Grass clippings, you don't do that in Mississippi because we have Bahia, Bermuda. It will be terrible. You know how people do the, what's it called, root spout method. We can't do that in South Mississippi because if we put hay on our potatoes, we would be growing hay bales. I mean, we don't have a way to not grow grass there. So we can't use grass clippings, but you can use it as a great nitrogen booster. Urine, that's pretty gross, but it's true. Urine is a good nitrogen boost. I don't peel in my gardens, but there's keep going in. So, blood meal, like we were talking about with the chickens, we just dilute our blood off our chickens, goes right back into the ground. Epsom salt, eggshells, ash, wafer aminos, pine. We have a ton of pine in Mississippi. Things like blueberry, they're acidic. Again, don't fight them. Don't put things around it. Put pine straw around it. They thrive off that acidic soil. Your pine is covering up the ground. It's giving acidity to the soil, but then it's allowing the blueberries to thrive. So think through what you're putting around each crop, because each thing can be benefited by what you're putting in. All right, so last thoughts. Think about this for a second. Don't do like this. Don't not journal. No. So you need to journal. You need to talk about your successes and your failures. If you don't know what you planted, when you planted, how you planted, what seeds you planted from, you did nothing. You grew crops, and then you got to start back over the next year. We love survival seeds. We love all seeds, all school seeds. We like other seeds locally. But here's the thing. They may not work for you. It may be a totally different seed that works for you. Don't take my word for it. You need to learn how to do that with your seeds. The more you build them up, just like the sweet potatoes, the tomatoes, the more you make a resistant seed, the better quality the plant is and the less work you have to do around that. So you're building up your soil, but it also comes down to the seed quality too. So you're building great quality seeds, building great quality soil, and then you need to journal that. talk about your successes. Don't be let down by the bad corn. You know, you got to just say, okay, I'm gonna try again next year. We're gonna try this. Companion planning's huge. We do a lot of companion planning. We do a lot of off-season planning. So with corn, where corn comes out, something that's going to help nitrogen go back in. So we may do red clover for the winter, right there in that one spot. Learn to learn plants. I was telling someone a while ago, one thing about organic gardening and organic growing, you're going to learn everything about that plant because you're going to know what it needs. If you don't know what it needs, then you're just going to go put your Milk Grow or your Osmocote or whatever you're putting on there for 13. That's all good. It's the easy button. I'm not condoning or condemning anybody that does that. But what I'm saying is just not what we believe in. If we're looking at it in a holistic way, I want to learn everything about that plant I can. So that way I know what it thrives with, what its failures are, what my failures are with that plant, so that way it builds a better quality garden to feed our family. We have 8 people, so our goal is to always grow as much food as possible. And if we can do that holistically, like we talked about the 3 S's yesterday, if we can do that in a sustainable way, good stewards for the ground, and satisfaction and joy. So, all right, any questions that y'all can think of that y'all want to ask us? Yes, sir.
What about?
We got to take this question, Simon.
You're good right now.
Okay. Yes, sir.
What about wood chip mulching? You know, when the tree services line up, we put that on our garden. That helps. Do you recommend that?
So we had this conversation with one of the guys who were getting a drop from the pipelines. This is what I would never put that stuff right around my crops right now, because to be honest with you, has sprays been on it, has any kind of like Roundup or chemicals been on it. So the things like that's coming off those pipelines that's been cut and mulched, the only thing I would do with it, I'd pile it up, I'd almost use it as a compost. I would fertilize it with, when I say fertilize it, I put manure in it, and I also put cover crop in it. That would be for seasons, like 2 or 3 seasons before. If I see that it's growing good quality cover crop, because cover crops are cheap. I mean, you can buy a thing of clover and, you know, things like that and throw in there. And that way, yeah, and so that way you know it's growing. Like Misty said, know your source too. If they're doing chip drops at your location and you don't know where this come from, I would be kind of skeptical of that putting in my garden, especially if you're trying to be as organic as possible. Now for us, what we do is, again, we're in a tree area in Mississippi. So that's a benefit for us, but there's one company that chips trees for a living. That's what their business is, and they bark. They do colored and landscaping mulch, but we know them and we say, hey, we want the rawest of the raw. So when they get something come in and it's just chips that they can't use really for anything else, they call us. We're the ones that come get it because we know it's there. So I would know my source. If they drop it off, this guy got 20 loads 2 days ago. My thought was, hey, you can leave it right there, you can age it with manure, and you can grow cover crop. He was concerned about if it was good for it and they graze on it. That's what he was worried about, or chemical. So what he did is, my advice with him was to put all the manure he had, cattle manure, run chickens on it, and then turn around and put cover crop in there. If it grows good quality over the next year or 2 or 3, then that would be something I would use. It'd help compost and break it down anyway. Yes, sir.
There's a place in also mulch, like all the people that cut down trees, they take it there and it's shredded and fine mulch and coarse mulch. And you can go there and pick up loads of it for no cost. I don't know that it's sprayed or exactly what comes from
I would do the same thing. I would ask, and if you don't know, then I would simply take it back home. I'd make it a compost being basically for 2 or 3 years and let it just roll over. If you start seeing natural growth there with the cover crops and things like that, I would be willing to use it at that point. It wouldn't be fresh though. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're going to be sending our roosters to freezer camp on Monday, and it'll be our first time. So, we talk about the feather meal. So water, that's.
So you can take it and make a pile method of compost, put some dirt over it, and you've just made a better compost, and it will age quicker. Or you can take it and if it's all season, whatever you're putting them on, the wet, nasty feathers that you get back, we literally just kind of trail them in the middle of the rows of whatever the off season is, as long as it's not producing fruit, and we do it that way.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, what do you guys do with insects? Other than daily, them off killing them, do you have anything?
There are OMRI listed items, neem oil, There's insecticidal soaps that are all considered. She was asking, what do you do? How do, if you're going to organic grow, how do you prevent some of the pests? There are some unrealistic, organically safe products out there besides just checking, you know, I do go out and check on them. And there are times, there have been times I have went out, hornworms, they love tomato plants and they will take down your plants overnight. So if you can catch them, black lights, there are things that you can do. If you see signs of hornworm, gives you a black light and go out there at night, those things blow up, you can pick them all off and you have them spray. Put anything on your plants.
Repel, for instance, when you.
Companion planting. Companion planting is another great thing. We were talking just a while ago about tomatoes. A great thing to companion plant with those that I do every single year is marigolds and basil, and that has really dramatically decreased the amount of bugs that are on my plants. And when we first started this, I have learned over the years things to put with plants with plants that benefit each other. Just get some books, those are my go-tos, books, and when you learn how to companion plant, there are certain bugs that don't like this plant, that normally like this plant, we put them together, and you've created a system to keep the bugs out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, bordering and repelling is great with other plants. Let those basil, we harvest basil, we love basil, but it's really more for the deterrent and repellent for the tomatoes to keep the worms down. Yes, ma'am.
With the rabbit manure, how much do you use? Because I know, I mean, one thing I was reading that was talking about, you know, these chemicals you use on a teaspoon of tablespoon, like 8 pounds of rabbit manure to equal that. So when you go out and do it, you just do it frequently, or do you use just a whole bunch?
We do, yeah. You want to take that?
So her question was, there's always these measurements on the chemicals you put. I haven't used them in so long, I wouldn't even know what to tell you. But if you look at the instructions, there's always instructions. And for us, what we do, it has been trial and error. I like to do frequently. I feed my plants frequently. You could go out and dump loads on it. I feel like that maybe would, I don't think that's a great idea. She was saying like 8 pounds of rabbit manure would have to equal like so much of the chemical fertilizer. I just feed mine frequently. It's a routine. I know that certain days I have to go out and clean out the rabbit pens. I take it to this, what we was talking about zones, we have zones. I take it to this zone this time. The next week I go clean out the rabbit pen, it goes to the next zone. So we rotate that around and our plants are always being fed.
And remember, when you're organic gardening, everything is pretty much slow release. So there's a few things that you can just kind of grow, but pretty much when it comes to organic gardening, you're feeding all year round for a good crop. You're not going to burn your crops with anything. So if you put 8 pounds of rabbit manure, you can. It will stink terribly, and you may even have flies around them, but you can do that. It won't hurt it. But I would challenge you to just do it more frequently and smaller amounts. Okay. We'll take the rest of the questions outside. We'll be out here for about 15 minutes.
Thank you all.